Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Nag and welcome to the channel. Today we're gonna talk about one of the most dangerous places on Earth. It's called Bikini Atoll and it's in the Marshall Islands. But let's not waste any more time and let's go right into it. So in 1946, French fashion designer Jacques Heim released a woman's swimsuit he called the Atom, French for atom, a name selected to suggest its design would be as shocking to people that summer as the atomic bombings of Japan had been in the summer before. Not to be outdone, competitor Louis Réart raised the stakes, quickly releasing an even more skimpy swimsuit. The Vatican found Réart's swimsuit to be way more than shocking, declaring it sinful. So what did Réart consider an appropriate name for his creation? Well, he called it the Bikini, a name meant to shock people way more than the atom. But now you may ask, why is this name so shocking? It's just a bikini, right? Well, in the summer of 1946, bikini was all over the news. It's the name of a small atoll, a circular group of coral islands within a remote mid-Pacific island chain called the Marshall Islands. The United States had assumed control of the former Japanese territory after the end of World War II just a few months earlier. The United States soon came up with really big plans for this little atoll. After forcing its 167 residents to relocate to another atoll, they started to prepare Bikini as an atomic bomb test site. Two bombings scheduled for that summer were intended to be very visible demonstrations of the United States' newly acquired nuclear might. Media coverage of the event at Bikini was really extensive and public interest ran really high. Who would have foreseen that even now, 70 years later, the Marshall Islanders are still suffering from these same bombings? So, according to the testing schedule, the US planned to demolish a 95-vessel fleet of obsolete warships on June 30th, 1946, with an airdropped atomic bomb. You had reporters, US politicians, and representatives from major governments of the world to witness events from a distant observation ship. On July 24, a second bomb, this time detonated underwater, would destroy any surviving naval ships. So these two sequential tests were intended to allow comparisons of air detonated versus underwater detonated atomic bombs in terms of destructive power to warships. The very future of naval warfare in the advent of nuclear war was in the balance. Many assumed the tests would clearly show the naval ships were now obsolete and that air forces represented the future of global warfare. But when June 30th arrived, the airdrop bombing didn't go as planned. The bomber missed the target by more than a third of a mile, so the bomb caused much less ship damage than anticipated. Subsequent underwater detonation didn't go well either. It unexpectedly produced a ray of highly radioactive water that extensively contaminated everything it landed on. So naval inspectors couldn't even return to the area to assess ship damage because of the threat of deadly radiation doses from the bomb's fallout. Now, fallout is the radioactivity produced by the explosion. So all other testing was put on hold until the military could assess what happened, what went wrong, and could determine a better strategy to continue the bombing. But the United States, however, were not ready to abandon the project just yet. They had really big plans for Bikini Atoll. So ultimately, there would be 23 bikini test bombings spread over 12 years comparing different bomb sizes, before the United States finally moved nuclear bomb testing to other locations, leaving Bikini Atoll to recover as best as it could. The most dramatic change in the testing at Bikini occurred in 1954, when the bomb design switched from fission to fusion mechanics. So fission bombs, like the one the US dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, explode when heavy elements like uranium split apart. Now fusion bomb, in contrast, explode when light atoms like deuterium join together. Fusion bombs, often called hydrogen or thermonuclear bombs, can produce much larger explosions. The United States military learned about the power of fusion energy the hard way when they first tested the fusion bomb on Bikini. Based on the expected size of the explosion, a swath of the Pacific Ocean the size of Wisconsin was blockaded to protect ships from entering the fallout zone. So on March 1st, 1954, the bomb detonated just as planned. But still, there were a couple of problems. The bomb turned out to be 1,100 times larger than the Hiroshima bomb, rather than the expected 450 times, and the prevailing westerly winds turned out to be stronger than meteorologists had predicted. The result? Widespread fallout contamination to islands hundreds of miles downwind from the test site, and consequently high radiation exposures to the Marshall Islanders who lived on them. So, only 3 days after the detonation of the bomb, radioactive dust had settled on the ground of downwind islands to depths of half an inch. So natives from badly contaminated islands were evacuated to Kwajalein, an upwind, uncontaminated atoll that was home to a large US military base, where their health would be assessed. Residents of the Rongelap Atoll, Bikini's downwind neighbor, received particularly high radiation doses. They had burns on their skin and depressed blood counts. Islanders from other atolls did not receive doses high enough to induce such symptoms. However, later we would find out that those that didn't receive radiation high enough to show symptoms would later put them at a risk or a higher risk of cancer, particularly for thyroid cancer and leukemia. Now, what happened next to Marshall Islanders is just a sad story of relocating from island to try and escape the radiation that would linger for decades to come. Over the years following the testing, the Marshall Islanders living on the fallout-contaminated islands ended up breathing, absorbing, drinking, and eating considerable amounts of radiation. In the 1960s, cancer started to appear among the islanders. For almost 50 years, the United States government studied their health and provided medical care, but the government study ended up in 1998, and the islanders were then expected to find their own medical care to submit their radiation-related health bills to a nuclear claims tribunal in order to collect compensation. Now, by 2009, the Nuclear Claims Tribunal, founded by the Congress and overseen by the Marshall Island judges to pay compensation for radiation-related health and property claims, exhausted its allocated funds with $45.8 million in personal injury claims, still owed to the victims. At present, about half of the valid claimants have died waiting for their compensation. Congress shows no inclination to replenish the emptied fund, so it's unlikely the remaining survivors will ever see their money. But if the Marshall Islanders cannot get financial compensation, perhaps they can still win a moral victory. They hope to force the United States and 8 other nuclear weapon states into keeping another broken promise. This one made via the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. International agreement between 191 sovereign nations entered in force in 1970 and was renewed indefinitely in 1995, aims to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and is actively working towards the disarmament. In 1914, the Marshall Islands claimed that the 9 nuclear-armed nations, China, Britain, France, India, Israel, North Korea, Pakistan, Russia, and the United States have not fulfilled their treaty obligations. The Marshall Islanders are seeking legal action in the United Nations International Court of Justice in The Hague. They've asked the court to require these countries to take substantive action towards nuclear disarmament. Despite the fact that India, North Korea, Israel, Pakistan are not among the 191 nations that are signatories of the treaty, the Marshall Islands suit still contends that these 4 nations have the obligation under customary international law to pursue negotiations in good faith. Now, this process is currently stalled due to jurisdictional squabbling, regardless of experts in international law saying the prospects of success through this David versus Goliath approach are just completely slim, or even non-existent. But even if they don't win in the courtroom, the Marshall Islands might shame these nations in the court of public opinion and draw attention to the dire human consequences of nuclear weapons. That in itself can be counted as a small victory for all people who have seldom been on the winning side of anything. At this point, only time will tell how this all turns out, but the Marshall Islanders, more than 70 years after the fact, are pretty much accustomed to waiting. Alright guys, that's it. That's the video. If you guys like, don't forget to leave a like below. Also, don't forget to check my Twitch channel. I'm gonna leave the link in the description. I stream every weekday and Saturdays. So I'll see you guys there. I'll drop a follow, comment, talk to me. Come on, let's have fun. Alright guys, see you guys next time.